this is something I normally do not share on my write-ups. This is one of the things you have to hire me for. So this is a special bonus. I practice what I call a series of escalating consequences when I want to disagree with the dog. The first thing I do, and I'm not going to go through all the rationales behind it, I'm just going to give a very short summary of it. First thing I do when the dog is about to break the rule, before they break the rule, but I know they're going to, I hiss at them. I have 10 versions of my hiss. I have level 1 hiss, like a tss, and I have level 10, which is more like a tss. I have to do a spray. So my hiss is translated to one of 3 things. No, don't do that, or most effectively, don't even think about doing that. Now again, disagreeing with the dog before it breaks the rule is when we hiss. My second consequence is to abruptly stand up. Probably caught my head off there. When you stand up abruptly and turn to face the dog. Whatever direction your hips and shoulders are facing is where your authority goes. So if the dog is in front of me, I stand up, I'm facing here, and the dog goes to my left, I pivot to my left and keep the dog in front of me. I wait for the dog to be stationary before I sit back down. It can stand in place, it can sit, or it can lie down. Or it can leave the room completely. But I'm going to wait for the dog to be stationary or leave the room before I sit back down. Third consequence, I'm going to stand up abruptly, or if I'm already standing, I'm going to march directly at the dog. Giving and taking territory is a big part of dog communication. So I'm going to march at the dog until the dog turns sideways to me. If the dog just backs up and he backs up 10 miles, he's still or she is still challenging you if they're facing you. So they're going to wait for that. As soon as they turn sideways, you stop immediately. That's a conversation. If the dog turns sideways and you take an extra step, now the dog doesn't know what it is. So if it turns sideways and you stop in tandem, I was like, oh, that's what it was. She didn't want me, chewing up on the furniture or whatever it was. Now, never step backwards when a dog is walking forward because, like, we're taking territory for the third consequence. If we're doing something else, we back up when the dog's moving forward. The dog thinks we're inviting them forward or saying, take this territory. So the third consequence, to sum up, is to march directly at the dog. You're not stomping your feet, but you're marching briskly at them until they turn sideways. And if they're still there, do not slow down, walk into them. If you have a little dog with brittle bones, you don't want to damage them. But the dog needs to think, if I'm still here when the human gets here, I'm going to get footprints on me because they're not stopping. So don't slow down or be tentative in your movements. It's got to be big, bold movements. You don't have to be sprinting, but you should have some deliberateness to your movements. The fourth consequence that I do, if the dog, now remember, these are in sequence. Now you can use them in combination. I can hiss, stand up, and march at a dog simultaneously if I know what it's going to do. But you always want to start with your hiss, and then you're going to march through these. So when I use the fourth consequence, I've already told the dog, hey, don't think about doing that with the hiss. Then it did it, and I stood up, and then it did it again, and I marched towards it until it walked away and turned sideways. Now it's doing it another time. Now it's being defiant. I've told it 4 times. A lot of people like to put their dog in a kennel. It is a horrible thing to do for a punishment because then later on when you put your dog in the kennel for no reason, the dog will think maybe this is a punishment because dogs learn through association. Also, when you put the dog in the kennel, you are not the authority figure. The kennel is the authority figure because the kennel is what's keeping the dog away. I want the dog to stay in the area if possible. If it's too excited, then I would take it in another room. But if it's wanting to run around and chase the kids and nip their butts, I'm going to put it on a leash, and I'm going to stand on the leash. I stand on the leash, giving the dog just enough room to stand or sit without ducking their head, but no extra room. I don't tell it to do anything. If it throws a temper tantrum, don't say a word. Just stand out with both feet. When the dog sits down, it'll sit as far away as the leash will allow. It'll be a tense leash. What you do is you take your foot that's on the leash and slide it towards the dog once it sits down to take the tension off and put slack back on the leash. A minute later, sometimes several minutes later, the dog will lay down. Now, we're not telling it to sit or lie down. We're waiting for it to do it on its own. When a dog lays down on its own, and it's calm. Now, it can lay down like this and not be calm. But when it lays down, it's calm. If this is the leash and my foot is on it, I just take my foot off and turn it to the side and put it back on the floor. I do it so subtly the dog doesn't realize it. And because I took the tension off earlier, the dog doesn't feel a difference. So now the dog is free, but it doesn't realize it. It's laying on the ground, and it's completely calm. When it gets up and walks away, it's going to drag the leash. You should only let it drag the leash as long as it's supervised. If a couple minutes later it gets ramped up again, we can step on the leash as it runs by and reapply the timeout. If a couple minutes later it's calm, then we can remove the leash. But we don't remove the leash or tell the dog good job or pet it right away as soon as it lays down because then it thinks, well, I can go right back to what I was doing. We want to achieve a calm, balanced state of mind. So, like I said, the fourth one is your atom bomb. And you're going to do it in the room that you're at, unless the dog can't calm itself down, then you would take it in the other room and do that. But if it's a couple minutes later, you take the leash off, then we're done. Now, the escalating consequences. Number 1, hiss. Number 2, stand up abruptly and turn to face them. Make sure it's abruptly. Number 3, stand up abruptly and turn to face them, or if you're already standing, just march at them. So if you're sitting, stand up, then march. And march at them until they turn sideways. Now, if you've done this and you have to go away after the dog turns sideways, stop. As soon as it turns sideways, I'm going to stand up. So let's kind of reposition this a little bit. So let's say I'm marching at the dog and the dog turns sideways. I stop and I want to go back to my seat. If I turn this way, my authority now is going that way. The dog's going to squirt up behind me. So as soon as I stop, then I take one step back. Left foot, or right foot, left foot only, and stop in place. Keep your feet squared. Wait a quarter of a second. The dog stays in place. Take another step back. Stays in place. Another step back. Take another step back, and the dog starts coming forward. So if it starts coming forward, then I say that's not what I want, and I immediately address it. Now, dogs learn through association. You have a window of 3 seconds. If you're petting your dog 3 seconds after it does something, or correcting it 3 seconds after it does something, it's not making the connection. So those are the escalating consequences we want to use when we want to disagree with whatever our dog is doing.
Okay, thank you.